The Supreme Court of Appeals has changed a great deal since the state was formed in 1863. Once called judges, members of the court are now called justices, and there are 5 rather than 3. The state added the 4th justice in 1872 and the final justice in 1903. The Supreme Court of Appeals has been housed inside the state capitol in Charleston for more than 80 years. But the state capitol wasn't always located in Charleston. In fact, West Virginia's capital moved 6 different times. The first meeting of the Supreme Court took place in Wheeling, inside the state's first capitol, now the Lindsay Institute building. On July 9, 1863, 3 judges, William Harrison, Ralph Berkshire, and James Henry Brown, gathered to organize the Supreme Court of the new state of West Virginia. Each was a Republican and Union supporter. Ralph Berkshire was the least wealthy of the 3. He was a well-known author of the book First Loyal Voice from West Virginia and had many articles published in the Wheeling Intelligencer. William Harrison was a member of the James River Harrisons, a family that owned a large portion of Virginia and what would become West Virginia. James Henry Brown came from an affluent family whose home, the Elms, was for a long time the largest in the state. It sat on the current site of the federal courthouse in Charleston. While serving as a circuit judge in the restored government of Virginia, he was almost killed by Confederate raiders. His buggy flipped over. Although he sustained a severe head wound and a dislocated ankle, he survived and protected the court records in his possession. As required by the state constitution, the first 3 judges' terms were determined by a drawing. 3 similar paper ballots were prepared. Each had a term length listed. The ballots said for 4 years, for 8 years, and for 12 years. The judges then each drew a slip of paper to reveal the length of his term. The person who drew the shortest term served as what was known at the time as president of the court. Currently, the court leader is called Chief Justice. Berkshire drew the short term of 4 years and served as the first president of the court. Harrison drew the longest term of 12 years. In 1872, a new constitution was adopted that increased the number of judges on the court to 4. That constitution was ratified specifically without an amendment allowing only whites to hold office. The newly elected 4th justice was John S. Hoffman. In 1901, the West Virginia legislature authorized a constitutional amendment adding a 5th justice. Voters ratified that amendment, and the court has had 5 justices since 1903. The position of Chief Justice is chosen by the members of the court on a yearly basis. The Chief Justice serves as the administrative head of the judicial branch. When the court is in session, the Chief Justice is seated in the center of all the justices. The most senior justice, after the chief, sits to his or her right. The second most senior justice sits to the Chief Justice's left, and so on. The least senior member of the court is seated in the chair on the Chief Justice's very far left. During most of the state's history, the Supreme Court was located inside whichever building was serving as the state capitol. In the early 1900s, West Virginia was growing, which in turn affected the court. It added an additional justice, and its caseload was increasing. Thus, the court needed more space and had to move out of the second Charleston Capitol building into the Capitol Annex on nearby Lee Street. That move proved to be a very historic decision. In January of 1921, the second Charleston Capitol building burned. The blaze left the old Capitol a total loss. The walls were still standing, but the building's interior was nothing more than a hollow shell. Theories about the cause of the fire abound. The final report submitted by fire officials cited defective electric wiring. Not everyone found that convincing. Some suspected arson. No one will ever know. Fortunately, the state's historic archives and court records escaped damage because they were located in the Capitol Annex. One of the historic treasures that still exist is the court's Order Book Number 1. This is a formal written record of all the business of the court. The entire book is written by hand. It contains the early business of the court from 1863 to March 3, 1868, nearly 5 years. Today, the court still records its business in a book like this. Laser printers have replaced the handwriting, and now it takes only about 6 months to fill a 700-page book. These books remain preserved in a fireproof vault near the Supreme Court chamber. Opening the doors to the Supreme Court of Appeals of West Virginia is like opening a history book. It's filled with stories, lessons, and cases that helped shape our current judicial system.
Let all persons having motions to make and appeals to prosecute come forward, and you shall be heard.